Hello everyone, welcome back to another exciting and informative episode of Digital Data Podcast. I'm your host, Cecilia Maundu, a broadcast journalist, a digital security trainer, and I work at the intersection of technology, human rights, and journalism. In this episode, we are exploring the rapidly evolving landscape of digital IDs in Ghana, a key topic that is revolutionizing how Ghanaians access services, interact with government institutions, and secure their online presence. As digital identities become an essential part of the modern society, Ghana has not been left behind, and it's taking charge in Africa with its ambitious rollout. To help us unpack the implications of this game-changing initiative, we are joined by Dora from Media Foundation of West Africa, a pioneer in advocating for privacy and digital rights across the region. Stay tuned as we discuss the challenges, opportunities, and future of digital IDs in Ghana and how it's changing the lives of millions. So we'll start by you introducing yourself and the work you do, and then we'll pick it from there.
My name is Dora Boamamauto. I work at the Media Foundation for West Africa. I'm the Program Director for Digital Rights and Freedom of Expression. I think basically that's it. I've been with the organization for about a decade and 2 years. And I guess that's my area of work, promoting freedom of expression and digital rights of all, especially women. And the Media Foundation for West Africa is a regional organization. It works on promoting and defending media rights, the right to expression in all forms across West Africa. And then we also, as part of our freedom of expression work, promotes digital rights or internet freedom so that people can exercise their rights online freely. And we also empower women to be able to express themselves online, assess their rights, and also generally to counter issues that keep women away from online spaces. And then under the Digital Rights Program, we run on digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. And I think that is where Ashna linked you to us, because basically the digital public infrastructure and digital public goods look at digital infrastructure that facilitates or serve as platform to open up opportunities, scaling up in ways and means which makes the infrastructure available beneficial to all, so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we just capitalize on what is available, expand, and then build and provide more goods and services that meet the needs of the citizenry. So basically so from that, we look at issues of digital payments, data exchanges, and also digital IDs in terms of the various biometric monetization processes going on across West Africa.
Thank you so much for making the time. This project is funded by GIZ through the African Union, where we are looking at 6 countries on the issue of digital ID, the 6 countries being Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. I must say I'm quite excited because most of the people I've interviewed are male. So this will be a refreshing part because there's also the issue of we have very few women who are talking about digital rights. So I'll go to the first question. How has Ghana approached the rollout of digital IDs, and what are some of the challenges that have been faced in the process?
It's a process that has been started, aborted, restarted, and all that for some time. But since 2017, there was a massive rollout, and it was more like, okay, you either decide to join or just note that some services you probably may not be able to have access to. And I think that kind of strategy was deployed because, like I said, there had been about 2 previous attempts at doing the same thing, and it appeared it didn't go far. So when this one came, it was almost like it's the same story. It's not really going to go far. So they started with a pilot phase, and then after that, the National Identification Authority opened up a number of branches across the country so that people could freely go in and then register. I think generally it was a smooth process. Of course, some of the centers were far off. So if you have a district making up maybe between 10 and 20 communities and you have maybe 2 centers, it means people have to travel to the centers to have the registration done. And that was a challenge.
Did the citizens really understand what is a digital ID, or they were doing it because the government government has said is either you get this or you don't get these services. I'm asking from the point of it was the same with Kenya. We had what we call huduma number. Huduma is a Swahili word which means service. So the government used this as same means where they say you either get this or you miss out on this service. So when I was doing a documentary on digital IDs, most of the people I interviewed didn't know even what is a digital ID, but they were doing it because they are afraid of not being able to access other services. So was it the same case in Ghana, or they actually understood what is a digital ID?
I'd say probably majority didn't understand truly what was meant by the digital ID. A lot of people do not have passports. So thinking that this could serve in some way as a form of identification, and especially for people who did not have a voter's ID card, which to a large extent was being used in many instances to register, for instance, for national health insurance, and where you needed to provide identification, then people would use a voter's ID card. So now thinking of this new ID system as something they could use either in place of a voter's ID or generally as a form of identification, or even in instances where they have to provide some information captured on passport or in passport, but they don't ordinarily have. A lot of people saw it as an opportunity to get that kind of identification, but not necessarily fully understanding it as a digital ID.
Is it fully operational, the digital ID?
Yes, it is. So upon registration, it is linked to your driver's, of course, not just driver's license, but depending on the registrations or the services you had registered for, that you had cards identifying you as beneficiary of, then you could have some kind of linkage with it. So we have a national health system or scheme. So if you, at the point of registration, had a card or a number, then you could link it. Then if you are a driver or you have a driver's license, you could link it. If you, SNIT is Social Security and National Insurance Trust. So if you are registered with SNIT, then you could also link your SNIT card. It was possible to have all those linked to the card, and it gave you some sense of, okay, probably this is not going to be like the other cards that we've had. And there's a possibility then of using it for these other services, even though it wasn't so clear from the beginning whether or not you could use it interchangeably. It is still not the case, but for some institutions, you would really need your Ghana card to verify first that it is you, and then in the provision of some services, they need the Ghana card to certify you can benefit or you can enroll. So let me just cite two examples. After the rollout of the national ID or the digital ID, there was another policy that was rolled out demanding that everyone synchronizes phone number with the national ID, and there was more like a deadline to it. So it actually forced people to do that. Now, when you want to have any kind of service with your network operator, you must confirm using your national ID or your digital ID. And then if you were to go to the bank to open an account or get some kind of services, you need your national ID or your digital ID, because another policy also came that everyone had to comply with, that you link your digital ID with your bank account. So if you go and make any request, for instance, if I were to go over the counter right now to request for a withdrawal, even though I may have a withdrawal book or a checkbook, they would also demand a copy of my digital ID to confirm before the money is given out. So it's more like a second layer in terms of cross-checking, certifying who is performing which service or who is receiving what service. So to a large extent, that is how far the digital ID goes.
That brings me to my second question. Has the digital ID helped in improving of access to public services in Ghana?
I think largely so, because there are some services you can apply for online, which previously was not the case. So for instance, if you were to be returning your taxes, previously we had the tax identification number thing per person. I mean, as many people as have enrolled or captured in the Ghana Revenue Authority's system, you would have to physically go there to make your payments or your returns. Okay. Now, with the synchronization of the ID, your phone number, and your bank, you'll be able to use your ID number, which now, to a large extent, is almost like interchangeable with your TIN, your tax identification number. You'll be able to use your national ID number to file your returns by paying through the mobile money network or through your bank. So you don't have to physically be present to get something like that done.
Knowing that tax is something that everyone has to do, how does the government ensure that marginalized groups such as rural residents, we live in Africa and majority of our population lives in the rural areas. So people who live in the rural areas, elderly, the women can be able to access these digital IDs?
At some point, I was trying to raise some of the challenges that came with the rollout and some of the challenges people still face, because there was more like a period of intensive rollout. And it was during that time that most people had to go and file long queues to register. So if time did not allow, or if those in the remote areas either did not have the funds to travel to registration centers, or for instance went once, but because of long queues, it was never their turn, they went and they couldn't travel back, which in most cases is the case. And then in some areas, also because there are remote connectivity challenges, so you register, but instead of the NIA officials processing your data and getting you the card instantly, it's either there's no network, so you have to wait, or you have to go and camp another day. And for quite a number of people, because of network challenges, even though they were able to register, they never had their card. Okay. So for such people, largely issue of linking your card to your mobile number became a challenge, and financial services also become a challenge, because for most of those people, they are really not banking, like as in they don't have bank accounts and engaging in kind of banking services, but they have mobile numbers that are connected to the mobile money service. So they either receive or remit. Okay. The challenge with that is that for those who could not register, when it became compulsory to link your ID with your contact number, they had to rely on relatives and friends who had registered.
That brings in also the issue of data sharing.
Yes.
Data is yes.
So they had to actually do the linkage with someone's SIM number. And like I say, you have to provide the information you need to the person too. And quite a number of the people in the rural areas are semi-literates and illiterates. So in terms of even keying the information, you virtually have to just mention everything out. And for some people, even their PIN codes, they had to give them out so that they're able to do the synchronization.
And it brings in the issue of digital literacy then. Digital for this.
Yes. And the issue of digital literacy is really, really not limited to, let's say, like the people in the remote areas or rural areas. Even in the urban and peri-urban, it's a big challenge.
A very big.
And among females is another level of a challenge. Okay. So generally, those were some of the issues. And so privacy issues and you see, when for instance, your digital ID is linked to your number, that has to do with mobile money. If there's a remittance and you need to, for instance, present your card at any point, then you would automatically need the card of that person to go to verify. Now, if the person is not available, or if the person then wants to exploit and say, okay, I'll go with you, but on condition that you give me this percentage of the money you are going to receive, I don't know if that is what is actually happening for this particular one. It's just like thinking around it and speaking to it. So if someone wants to be that exploitative, then you become susceptible.
Yeah, because you see that you are also depending on these persons to be able to help you access this money.
Yes.
So, and how does the implementation of these digital IDs in Ghana support the African Union effort in fostering governance, peace, and security?
Well, the Africa we want, for the people and by the people. I think in terms of security, there are two layers to it. I think generally, if governments would be accountable and transparent and honest, then with the digital IDs, it's a way of knowing who is where. Okay, makes management and governance relatively easier. In terms of service provision, relatively easier. But the challenge is usually with the experience we've had with our government, sometimes they exploit these data sets that are available to them and then abuse people, surveil people, and breach privacy laws and principles.
That brings the issue of political goodwill, because as you said, if the government wants, political goodwill also plays a very key role for the success of this digital IDs.
Governance and security. That's what I'll say. Data is very key in development. It helps in planning and in projecting and forecasting. So if the digital ID rollout is successful across the continent, I think it will make some kind of planning, whether it's infrastructure, anything and everything around human development becomes relatively easier. That is, again, if the data will not be exploited. And it also helps in terms of building inclusive and sustainable societies or economies. Because if, for instance, the many people who are unbanked are able to use the digital IDs to access or even open accounts without necessarily having to go to banks. But because their digital IDs are available, accessible, and can be verified, they can have some form or level of banking. It helps. It also helps in terms of connectivity, in terms of productivity, reduction in loss of time, human resource energy. It helps in fostering collaboration. Trust levels are generally higher because I know who I am dealing with when it comes to any business deal, and it helps generally in building economies. It's one of the best things that we could have, except the challenge of exploitation, data privacy, surveillance, political targeting, depending on who is in government, where, and what they want to do, And I think one fear that actually came out when policy about synchronizing your digital ID with your telephone number or your contact number came up was the fear or possible fear of easy access to anyone by any government at any point in time. So, for instance, if you're a journalist and you are seen to be critical about a government and they want to, for instance, track your communication and generally your movements and everything that you do, it relatively makes it easier.
Allow me to ask, because you've mentioned all these things. So the issue is the common man, that is people who live in Accra, are they aware of all these things when it comes to privacy, it comes to the issue of data being shared, all that? Are they aware? What is the government doing to enlighten people on this issue?
Well, I think if you ask whether or not people are aware, I would say maybe majority are not aware. And in terms of sensitization, education, advocacy around it, I think the few organizations that have been raising these issues, but the government would explain that we have a Data Privacy Act or law which protects everyone. And so if at any point in time you feel there's a data breach, you just use the legal process to seek redress.
Well, I must say it is easier said and done. When it comes to the issue of data protection, a lot of countries now are embarking on adoption of data protection. In Kenya, there's the Data Protection Act, which is in place. However, very few people know what it is entail. Remember, there is also the issue of jargon. Does the common man really understand when my data is related, I can take the route A, B, C, D. Additionally, the issue of law is not cheap. I'm not sure how it is in Ghana, but in Kenya, it's quite expensive for you to be able to go through the legal channels, to hire a lawyer and all that. Anyway, Dora, that brings me to my other question. What are some of the collaborative initiatives that are in place to ensure that Ghana's digital ID system benefits the wider African continent?
Well, Pan-African payment systems that allows and enables and facilitates payments across a number of countries on the continent. So with the Pan-African payment system, so I can be here and I can safely transfer money to anyone in Kenya or anyone across the continent, provided, let's say, the bank or the network is synchronized on the platform. And I think you couldn't have a better partnership than something like that using this ID facility because of the uniqueness of the IDs and the fact that biometrics are involved. The level of security is generally high, and I think it makes it relatively easier engaging across the countries, so that if I am sending something to Cecilia, I have to go or I have to provide my ID, which will have to be cross-checked and confirmed before the payments can be made. And I think if maybe all the countries on the continent were to have strong, solid digital ID infrastructure, it will make collaboration easier. It will facilitate trade. You don't really need to be in a particular space to engage in a particular kind of business. You can be anywhere, but because the ID is singular and is accepted and respected across any and every country on the continent, it helps. In terms of collaboration in governance, security, I think in all these, you still need credible data that would help in planning as a continent. And so having that can really help in facilitating and boosting collaboration, economic development, governance, security, and many more.
To my last questions, what lessons can Ghana experience provide to other nations in terms of policy, technology, and inclusivity? And also, we are talking about for digital ID to be successful, we are talking about connectivity, not only connectivity, but meaningful connectivity. So what are some of the lessons that the rest of the nations can borrow from Ghana?
I think so far, so good. It's generally been a success here. Of course, there have been challenges. Some people are still without IDs. But I think that for those who have not started at all, Ghana can be a case study for them. Picking the successes so they can learn from it, picking the challenges so they can also learn and find ways and means of mitigating those challenges so that their systems could even be better. So in terms of rolling out, there should be enough sensitization and education about it. In terms of the centers for registration, they should be as close to the citizens as possible so that irrespective of your location, you can still be able to register. In terms of connectivity, I think it comes with two issues: strong connectivity and also issues of electricity, power. Because if you go with your gadgets to a remote area that does not have connectivity to doesn't have electricity, and they don't have a generator, then it means that the service people with the gadgets can only work as long as the machines that have been charged can work. Beyond that, they have to pack and go. So in terms of network connectivity, the infrastructure that would help, the fiber, satellites, and all those things that boost and facilitate connectivity, that should also be taken care of. And then the issue of security. People still find ways and means of maneuvering to kind of outsmart the system. But I think if better security systems are put in place, it will help. And I think generally, it will also support in terms of economic growth because there will be more financial inclusion and then there will be less cash transactions. We will have more of these digital payments, which will reduce the cash and then theft and related issues. So I think generally, that's what I'll say. I mean, for those who are yet to roll out, these are some of the things they should look out to ensure that theirs become even more successful than ours. And then link digital IDs as much as possible to a lot of services, if for nothing, not private, at least government services, so that you don't have to physically be present in performing a task or making a request or getting a service. Once your ID is captured, then you are good to go.
I think one of my key takeaway in this conversation is the issue of privacy, is the issue of connectivity, and the issue of also civic education for the public to be educated exactly what is digital ID. But it is very impressive to see that Ghana has actually rolled out this system. And by this conversation, I mean, it is working. So maybe we should come to benchmark in Ghana and learn a few things. Thank you so much.
Yes, Busana.
And that wraps up today's episode of Digital Data Podcast. A big thank you to our guest Dora from Media Foundation of West Africa for shedding light on the evolving digital identity landscape in Ghana. We hope you now have a deeper understanding of how this system is transforming lives and what lies ahead for the future. If you enjoyed today's episode, which I'm sure you did, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions in the world of technology, journalism, privacy, and digital rights. Asante sana.